We continue this 4 o'clock hour on 365 Sports the night or day after Baylor and West Virginia in Morgantown, with West Virginia winning the shootout 43-40. Taylor McHargue, ESPN college football analyst, joins us on 365 Sports. Taylor, a lot of people today are trying to figure out what in the hell's wrong with Baylor's defense.
Man, it's the million-dollar question right now. Look, the first thing I would say, Blake getting hurt obviously impacted that game. It looked like Baylor consistently throughout this season having trouble putting games away. Special teams letting them down again. We saw the big return against Oklahoma State a couple weeks ago. That block extra point was huge last night. But overall, it just feels, not just on the defensive side, but it feels like a team that is not all the way there and used to closing out games and winning. And it's obviously last year, plenty of that on their way to the Big 12 championship. But this year, they're having trouble getting over the hump and putting games away in the fourth quarter.
What were your thoughts on West Virginia last night? That was a win that Neil Brown really needed to kind of buoy the team. But to me, Taylor, the whole game kind of felt like two teams regressing to the mean at different times after they did good things.
Yeah, I thought JT Daniels had a nice game, but it wasn't, he didn't play out of this world. They ran the ball well. West Virginia had over 200 yards rushing. But there wasn't anything that jumped out that you would say, okay, West Virginia did this really well. I thought what kept them in the game was Baylor's 4 turnovers. I mean, the 3 fumbles, that's huge. And that to me is, anytime you have 4 turnovers, especially on the road, you're going to allow a team that you're better than to claw back in a game. And I think that really speaks to, for Baylor fans that are obviously, maybe hitting the panic button. If they clean up turnovers, they win that game. And so there's still everything out in front of them. The Big 12 this year, to me, it's going to take 3 losses to really be out of contention. I do think it's possible that a 2-loss team is going to be in the Big 12 championship at the end of the year. And the good news for Baylor is it's unlikely that West Virginia makes a run at this. So if one of your losses is to West Virginia, it's unlikely that you're going to be in any sort of tiebreaker scenario. All that to say, this does not look like a team in Baylor that I think is going to be back in the Big 12 championship. I think there's some games coming up. I think about their road trip to Texas Tech. That's a team that's playing really well at home. And then down the stretch, man, it's a gauntlet for Baylor to end the season. In November, they go at Kansas State, TCU, and then at Texas. To try and say that they're going to have to win out through the remainder to get back to the Big 12 championship, I don't see that happening this year for this team.
Yeah, I see no chance at all of that happening based on what we've seen through 6 games so far, Taylor. I know you probably haven't had a chance to really dive into this game, but last night it just seemed like it didn't matter if it was 3rd and 2 or if it was 3rd and 22. West Virginia was going to move the chains. I mean, Baylor's defense could not get off the field to save their life. And the couple of occasions when they did, they couldn't follow it up in other areas. But defensively, was there anything in particular that you noticed West Virginia doing, or anything about the Baylor defense in particular where the Mountaineers just stayed on the field and stayed on the field?
Yeah, I thought West Virginia did a good job of staying ahead of the sticks, where it didn't feel like there were a lot of 3rd and longs, right? I felt like a lot of drives you looked up and it was back to, the 2nd and 4. And West Virginia did a really nice job of consistently running the ball well on 1st and 2nd down to where they had those, 3rd and manageables. And that's huge because it avoided, West Virginia only had to go for it on 4th down one time. Now, they didn't get it, but that is the type of game that West Virginia needed to play against Baylor. But to me, again, 4 turnovers in a game on the road in Morgantown. I know it's not a great West Virginia team, but, man, a Thursday night in prime time and you give them the ball 4 times, more often than not, you're not going to win that game.
Taylor, you played the position of quarterback at Rice. Kyron Drones came in a moment where they needed him, and up until the decision when he was being sacked to not throw it away or just take the sack, because you lost any points right there, even though you had the Doyle interception. Can you try to explain just that the pace of the game, the quickness of the game, the speed of the game, and a decision by a young quarterback that it's not sometimes easier said than done?
Well, you're exactly right that it is easier said than done because he's coming off the bench. He hasn't played a ton of football. I thought he did some nice things. I mean, his efficiency wasn't bad in relief for Blake Shapen, but the interception was critical. But again, I thought, was there some room for improvement for him? Certainly. But coming off the bench late in a game on the road in a Big 12 environment, a lot asked of him. I thought really Baylor's defense let them down late, because that's when your backup comes in, that's when you have to lean on the other side of the ball. And that defensive unit has to say, we've got to get stops for him and give them short fields, make this easier on our offense.
Taylor McHargue, ESPN college football analyst with us, 365 Sports on this Friday afternoon.
Taylor, you are not doing a game this week. You've got the bye week, which is glorious for those of us, like when you get to have a whole Saturday where you just get to watch games. There are some great ones around the country, starting in the Big 12 with TCU and Oklahoma State. This is where we kind of find out maybe who the front runners in this league. How do you see that game shaking out?
This one, so number one, you're exactly right. I'm fired up to have a bye week because I'm going to be watching all of these games. I'm going to be watching the games tonight as well. For Oklahoma State and TCU, I like TCU against really anybody that they stack up against right now. Their explosiveness on the offensive side, until somebody stops them, I think they deserve to be given the benefit of the doubt, because I just don't know who in this league is going to limit them enough. And Oklahoma State, I still don't trust their offense and Spencer Sanders. I know he's played better than he did last year, but on the road at TCU, games on ABC, I trust TCU more in this spot. But you're exactly right. I mean, there's so many games. My only frustration, and just as a fan of the game, my only frustration is I feel like the past few weeks, our primetime games and the best games of the weekend all keep happening in the morning. We've got so many 11 a.m. and 2:30 p.m. kicks where by the time you get to the night schedule, I get A&M and Alabama was supposed to be a bigger matchup than it ended up being. Ended up being a good game, but yeah, I think Iowa State, Texas, interested to watch that. Kansas, I know they've got the backup in at quarterback, but they're more than a touchdown dog to Oklahoma, and then obviously Penn State and Michigan. That's another big one that I think Penn State, undefeated, they're sitting at number 10 in the country, and nobody's really talking about them. So interested to watch all those as well.
What do you think of KU without Jalen Daniels? Most likely, I know they haven't officially ruled him out, but for all intents and purposes, they have. I mean, Jason Bean obviously played well, and then on that flip side, I mean, quarterbacks, I guess where you start with Oklahoma last week, you'd have to hope Dylan Gabriel comes back, but without that certainty as well, what direction do you look if you're Brent Venables?
Yeah, let's start with OU. I think the local media, and I hate to put too much blame on local media around Norman, but there were some pieces that came out about Oklahoma from local media that I think really moved the goalposts on expectations for the Sooners this year. It's just unfair to their fan base. This was never going to be a team in their first year that was going to compete for the Big 12 championship. They have 50 guys on this roster that were not on the team last year. That's how hard they hit the transfer portal with a first-time head coach. It's to think that they were going to come out and be the Sooners that we, have come to know and expect was just unfair to the kids on the team and unfair, frankly, to that fan base. Also, I think they will get to a bowl game likely, especially if Dylan Gabriel gets healthy here soon. But to me, the issues are going back to having that much turnover at really every position. You've got guys out of position all the time. You watch them in the back end. You've got guys running scot-free. I mean, completely. There's nobody around them open in the secondary. And then you've got, linebackers misfitting in the run schemes. You've got linemen that are going the wrong directions when they're trying to pull. It's at all three levels. Doesn't matter. Issues that they're going to have to sort through once they get into spring ball going into next year. But a lot of those are not going to get solved this season. For Kansas, I think what's interesting is the scheme that they run with Bean coming in. He should be able to run that. He's not as good as Jalen Daniels is, but the scheme that they run allows Kansas is beating people by getting your eyes going in the wrong direction and getting explosive playmakers on the outside when you have flow going the other way. And to me, that says, okay, well, you can still win with that team with your backup quarterback in. It's not like it's a super complex offensive scheme like something A&M is running. So I still like Kansas to win this game, even with their backup in. I'm surprised that the line is what it is against Oklahoma.
Has your opinion changed about Texas after what happened last week at the Cotton Bowl?
It has. It absolutely has. And I think Quinn Ewers is there's really only two guys in the country to me that are playing at a higher level at quarterback than he is. And one's a Heisman Trophy winner, and the other one, C.J. Stroud, is the favorite to win the Heisman Trophy because Quinn does things. And I know, again, against Oklahoma, there were guys running completely open, nobody around them. But there were also throws that he's made against OU and going back to that first half against Alabama that there just aren't very many guys that can make those throws. He's off balance. He's moving one direction, having to throw back to the left. Those are things that, when you talk about arm talent, that's what that means. And if he's healthy, they've only got one conference loss right now. And I don't think it's out of the question at all that if they can they should beat Iowa State this week. If they can get through and even go 1-1 against Oklahoma State and Kansas State on the road the next 2 weeks, I think there's still a chance that this Texas team you look up and they have a chance to get into the Big 12 championship at the end of the year. It feels like the opposite of last year where they lost the Red River rivalry and momentum went the wrong direction. They went on that losing streak. To me, it feels like they've got their quarterback healthy. They've got momentum going in the right direction. And if they can win convincingly against Iowa State, and look out, this could be a team that, again, we end up seeing in Dallas for the Big 12 championship later in the year.
Taylor McHargue, ESPN college football analyst and color analyst on television broadcast as well, with us on 365 Sports.
Taylor, Hendon Hooker and the Vols, I mean, a lot of hype heading into this game with Alabama. Obviously, Bryce Young will be the big wild card in this whole thing. I think everybody pretty much feels like if Milroe has to play again, then this is Tennessee's game to lose. But how are you viewing this matchup and what is obviously a huge weekend there for Tennessee in particular?
Yeah, I think this is one where you've got to trust the wise guys in Las Vegas and assume that they know what's going on, because this line was under a field goal and then it jumped to a touchdown in favor of Alabama. And to me, that means Bryce Young's playing. They know something that the rest of the public doesn't. To me, now he might not, but I think it's likely he plays given where that line is. And if he plays, I think they win. I think he's that much of a difference maker. Tennessee's defense, not great. And Alabama will get enough stops on the defensive side that, think about last week, Alabama had 4 turnovers and still, I know A&M's offense isn't great, but really limited most of the offensive production the entire game for A&M. Now, this is a totally different type of offensive unit for Tennessee, but if Bryce Young plays, I like Alabama to win this game. If he doesn't, absolutely. I think this would, Alabama was the favorite still, assuming Bryce wasn't playing. I would think that it's really more of a field goal favorite for Tennessee if Bryce doesn't play, but the environment's going to be incredible. They've got game day coming back. It really will, to me, depend on if Bryce plays, and right now I would expect him to play.
Taylor, are we at a point now with Baylor losing this game, and we kind of discussed this week because the expectations, of course, were very high and things have not gone well. But are we at the point now where you start looking for the how they're going to win enough games to get to a bowl game, or is that a little bit far-fetched?
Well, I don't think it's far-fetched because, coming down the stretch, you've got to get 3 more. And the good news is they get Kansas, which is a game that you would think with their backup in, they should probably be able to win that game, especially because they're going to be at home. Then you got to go on the road. You got to go to Tech, tough place to play. You got to go to Norman. And if they get Dylan Gabriel back, now that becomes, a toss-up game at best for Baylor. What's going to be critical for them is they're going to have to get at least one upset against a team that they're not going to be favored against. Mm-hmm. And that may even be at home later in the year where they're getting Kansas State and TCU. You're going to have to get one of those, because if they don't, if this comes down to they're 5-6 and they've got to go to Austin and get a win on the road, man, I don't know. I would not trust them to win in that spot in Austin. They're going to have to get at least one at home that they're likely going to be a home dog.
Taylor McHargue, ESPN college football analyst. Baylor losing in Morgantown to West Virginia, and as he and all of us will be able to do tomorrow with no Baylor game, a chance to sit back, relax, and watch some bangers, some big-time games among top 25 teams. And even some teams like LSU in Florida, Brigham Young in Arkansas that are trying to figure out and get to the next level out of kind of a funk. This is 365 Sports.